Hello, good afternoon, good morning for those of you joining from the other part of the Atlantic. I would like to welcome all of you to this hopefully clarifying session on the Corporate Sustainability Assessment and the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, that, as you know, is the most relevant ESG index in the world. On behalf of AERI, I would like to thank all of our in-person attendees. I would like to thank our online attendees. We had more than 130 people registered from 8 different countries, Mexico, US, UK, Portugal. We even had someone registering from Sri Lanka, so more than happy, of course. I would like to thank our joint organizers for this event today that are S&P Global and World, and of course WTV, that is our technical streaming supporter in all our events. And finally, last but not least, I would like to thank our speakers. We have today Robert Dornau from S&P Global Sustainable One, Sol Cabeza from Redeia, and Natalia Valls from CaixaBank. Two of them, unfortunately, are joining us from online because of some agenda issues, but we are more than happy to have them that way, and the technology allows us all that kind of things. And of course, our very own ESG advisor, Tomás Conde, who will be moderating the session today. We are trying to see a triple view on the topics. We'd like to have the view from the rater, ESG rater. We'd like to have the view from the sustainability area, and of course, the view from the investor relations area, as we consider that the three of them will be complementing each other. We are doing this event because we've had regularly in the last few years some pressure from our members. They want to know what indexes to follow. So what are the ESG indexes to follow, where to focus their efforts on, what are the eligibility reasons that investors are following, and they just need to know. And especially right now, as you know, the CSA season, the CSA question session is opening, if I'm not wrong, Tomás, early April. So this is a really good time to host this session. And finally, just to let you know, we've had so much pressure to talk about ESG indexes that in the second quarter we'll be organizing another event regarding the main ESG indexes. And I don't know when, but this year as well, we'll be hosting a session with a view from the investors, what the investors want to know about you on the ESG. And without further ado, Tomás,
okay,
hand out the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Javier. Thank you. Okay, so thanks so much to all of you, as Javier was saying. And so let me first say that there has been a whole bunch of questions coming from the members of the Spanish Association for Investor Relations, as you can know. This is the reason why we organized this, as Javier was mentioning before. I loved what he said. I didn't know what he was going to say, of course. He talked about the triple vision from the investor relations, from sustainability, and from the rating, from the raters. And I think this is critical. This is why we have these 3 amazing speakers today with those 3 visions, all right? So I am going to, first we are going to have Robert Dornau. He's the global head of CSA of engagement from Standard & Poor's Global. He will be giving us a speech for 10 minutes in order to know what the latest updates are there within the CSA. And then I will approach each of you guys with some questions. I have 6 questions for each of you. And then we will open the floor for Q&A global. Okay, so I will try to address any question that you might have. Online and in presence. It will make no sense if you guys have some questions left. Please ask anything, and we will try to do our best in order to answer your queries, all right? Okay, so let me first introduce the speakers. Okay, so in the first place we have on the screen Natalia Valls. She is a degree in economics and PhD in business, specializing in financial econometrics models. She has experience in financial markets and risk for 12 years and has been in the world of sustainability for 6 years. So you are kind of brand new. That's good, because if you are in this business of ESG for longer than 10 years, then you are PR. So that's good news. Natalia currently is the coordinator manager of the Sustainability Strategic Reporting Team Lead. And well, Caixa, you know that perfectly well. It's a 31 billion market cap bank. out of the 506 assessed financial institution banks, Kaiser is top 10% worldwide with an ESG score of 80 versus Isan Financial Holding, a Taiwanese bank, with 87. So that's pretty close. Okay, thanks for being here. Then in second place we have Sol Cabeza. She's the head of investor relations at Redeia from May 2022, so 1 year old. But previously she was at equity IR at Iberdrola for 15 years. So you have a whole bunch of experience on IR. And well, Redeia is a 9 billion market cap electric utility out of the 184 assessed within the CSA, and a GSG score of 86 versus best one, which is Terna in Italy with a 91. So we are again talking about top 10% worldwide. And in third place, we have Robert Dorneau. He's also online. He is, as I say, the chief of all this. He is the global head of corporate engagement at Standard & Poor's Global. He was previously at Robico Sam in third. I still remember that a time ago, I used to go there quite often, at least once a year, in order to talk to my analyst. But I guess that's no longer low. That's probably one of the questions. We'll see later on. And Robert previously, she was managing partner at Carbon Flow Switzerland AG. Okay, so having introduced the speakers, Robert, if you're so kind, please, if you have 9 to 10 minutes, please, no more, so that you can explain us what the CSA is and all the topics around the session of today. So please, the floor is yours. Go ahead, Robert. Thank you. You're muted. I cannot hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Javier, and AERI for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to present the CSA today and discuss it with some longtime participants. That's always very inspiring to us. So I don't know, are my slides on the screen? Yeah, so I was asked to give a very quick introduction to the CSA for those that do not know it. The CSA has been around for 24 years now. It was established by a boutique asset manager. So from the beginning, we were looking at sustainability with the eyes of an investor. That means we're not looking just as environmental sustainability. We're looking at all three dimensions: environmental, social, governance. And we're looking at how can a company link their sustainability and their business strategy. How can they articulate that link? And how does that impact their value drivers, their growth, capital efficiency, and costs and risks, of course. Next slide, please. So what you see here is the development of CSA participation. It was formed 24 years ago by this boutique asset manager called SAM. Very early on, they formed a collaboration with Dow Jones Indices to use the CSA results and the scores calculated from that to select companies into the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, short DJSI. For many companies that was equal to the CSA, but in fact it is just one output of the CSA. Over the years, more indices were added, and the growth was very, very slowly but steady increasing, because initially we only invited the largest companies globally, that is the 3,500 largest companies globally. And in the meantime, around, I think, 2006, Dow Jones was acquired by S&P Global. And then as a natural follow-up, they also acquired the CSA out of this asset manager in 2019. And that gave a massive boost to CSA participation. One main reason being, of course, that the universe was extended. So instead of just inviting the 3,500 largest companies, we now invite 13,000 companies globally. And of course, if there's a larger base, there's also a larger percentage of companies participating, but also these companies would only participate because they see value in this participation. What you see for Spain is that the universe increased also a lot based on this move away from just inviting DJSI eligible companies. We had massive participation rates there and still see them. Out of 27 companies that are invited and eligible to be included in any DJSI, 25 of them participate. And in total, out of the 102 companies that we invited last year, 61 participated. So also well over half of them. The 3,000 companies that participate now represent more than half of global market cap. So it is really a very impressive number and a very much showing the trust that companies have in the CSA and the value of the benchmark to US corporates, but also to the market. Next slide, please. Very quickly, for those of you that don't know the CSA, it's building up from what we call the data point level. Data point can be, does your board nomination policy consider gender, industry experience, nationality, ethnicity, etc.? Or each point of emissions data is a data point that gets aggregated into questions, criteria, dimensions, and the final score. And what you see here as the size of the segments is the different materiality that we assign in the aggregation process from data point to final score. And we have 61 different representations of these, this year already 62 actually, where up to 50% of the criteria are industry specific. What you see on the left here is the ones that we really ask in each and every industry. In corporate governance, of course, climate strategy, human rights. This is something that every company needs to be concerned with. But the next slide, please, gives you an overview of different industries. And the takeaway here is that we have criteria that apply cross industry, something like information security, cybersecurity, that is of course relevant in pharmaceuticals, also in restaurants, less relevant from our materiality analysis in mining and minerals. But therefore biodiversity is where you see an overlap basically across all three. Again, in this example, access to drugs, health outcome contributions is something that is very unique to this industry. So with the questionnaire, we challenge companies on very unique questions that we and investors see as material for their industry. And the takeaway from this slide is they are different weights that you see in the different shades of the dimensions and shapes on the top of the slide, and different criteria that we ask in each industry-specific case. Next slide, please. Of course, this methodology develops. Every year we change about 10 to 15% of the questions, and we do that because sustainability is a developing topic. If we were to ask companies the same questions we asked 20 years ago, all of them would score 100 points. And the questionnaire is designed to really differentiate between the leading companies. So I'm with the CSA for 9 years now, and never ever a company scored more than 95, because that is not the intention. We want to ask questions that are difficult enough and challenging enough, really always going into new areas of sustainability, underreported trends. I will look into that in a second. To also help companies evolve their sustainability strategy and their sustainability transparency. And we develop that methodology, of course, with our own research and insight, but we also work with thought leaders, standard setters, think tanks, regulators, and most importantly, now that we are no longer owned by an asset manager, we keep close contact with investors, as S&P Global has them as clients for many, many different services, including the scores developed from the CSA. And these investors provide input to us what is important for them and what we should improve and also include in the methodology. And then, of course, your feedback as a company that participates is very important to help us shape the questions in a way that they really also help you on your sustainability agenda. Next slide, please. So something that companies that participate for many years really value is that the CSA is evolving and that every year we introduce new topics. We have started human rights, for example, very, very early on. In 2002, and it has developed into a very sophisticated question from a very simple question that would maybe just ask about your company's commitment to the Ruggie framework or general understanding of human rights, now into a question where you really need to have a very strong commitment in place. You need to be able to do due diligence and assess your exposure to human rights, have a plan what you do if you meet human rights challenges, to not just walk away from them, but to address them. And what we heard from AXA, the French insurance company, for example, is that when the French authorities put regulation for human rights in place, they were spot on. They could report on everything because they had this track record of reporting to the CSA and gradually improved their reporting with the questions that became more and more challenging over the years in the CSA. Next slide, please. So what we changed this year to accommodate really companies' reporting schedules. In the past, we had fixed windows that we dictated and we put companies into these groups. And this year we made this completely flexible. You can pick monthly start dates to then have 2 months to complete the CSA to meet your own reporting schedule. If you are DJSI eligible, of course, there is a cutoff with the July-August window as the last window to have a participation-based score that then can be used to select companies into DJSI for the December 8 rebalancing. But we are fully flexible now with when you want to participate. And of course, that links to when you get your score, which is also in monthly windows starting in August. Next slide. So the feedback for those that don't participate, there's a lot of free value that you get out of the CSA. It's really detailed benchmarking with a trend analysis. How does your company perform against its peers? Who are the leaders in your industry? Who are companies close to you? How do they perform down to question level compared to your company? And also very important as a benefit, next slide, please. With the acquisition of S&P Global, the scores were no longer proprietary to one asset manager, but they are now for 1 year available to capital markets through our Capital IQ Pro platform. And I know that companies often tell us it's only investors asking for MSCI scores. I can tell you this will change. We hear from first companies that it is changing. The scores are only out there for 1 year and have attracted S&P Global clients that bought into that special module of scores on our platforms. And these clients represent $30 trillion in assets under management. That is a massive amount. We are not allowed to name names, but you can imagine that the biggest asset managers have to be amongst them to get to this massive amount of $30 trillion in assets under management. So this is clearly, if you're not in DJSI, which is largely a benefit of getting this level of distinction, this is the real benefit that you get from participation, is this exposure to investors interested in your performance. And last slide. These are just some extra resources. I assume the slides are shared. I encourage you, if you're interested, to watch the replays of the webcasts that we already held this year that explain everything in a lot more detail than I did now. So I'm maybe a minute over time. Sorry, Thomas, but it's always a lot to squeeze into to explain the CSA in short notice.
Robert, thanks so very much. It is really worth it. As it's okay, you kept the time very well. I will approach you later on, but just one quick answer to my question that I'm going to raise to you right now, or maybe later. But would you agree that the CSA, which is the base to the different indexes, mainly the Dow Jones Stability Index, because I keep saying that this is the best ESG management tool that I know. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, it's always not the right thing to pat your own shoulder, right? I would wait for the companies what they have to say. Yeah. Really, what I see, the feedback that we get from companies in the terms of feedback that we provide to companies, we really provide not just the question level scores, but we provide feedback down to each and every data point and tell you how we assessed that, was it accepted or not. And this is really guidance that came from the top, from our CEO, Doug Peterson, when they purchased the CSA. This was on their agenda to make it the most transparent assessment and most valuable to companies.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. Okay. So I just remind you that if you guys want to raise your hand or make any questions, go ahead. Use the online tool to do so. And if you are here in the room, please raise your hands, and I will approach each of you later on. Okay. So thank you so much. Okay. So thank you, Robert. Okay. So I'm going to start with the with each of the questions. All right. So the first one would be for Natalia, CaixaBank. Natalia, what are the primary motives for companies and institutions to subject themselves to these very demanding assessments? Very demanding, as you will know. And what advantages do they entail? If you're so kind, Natalia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity of sharing views with S&P, AERI, and Redeia. And now going to the point. Well, regarding the reasons for us to submitting ourselves to this type of assessments, the main one would be improving our sustainable performance, of course. I mean, the great advantage that we have performing, assessing this kind of evaluations is that we can internally move up the organization. I mean, we can speak one by one to all the directions, all the areas of the bank, and explain that an evaluation has been done and we have some gaps and we have to improve on that. Then if we don't do that, we can fail with the analyst. And that has an, let's say, acid consequence to the market. That's why for us is very important to submit ourselves to this kind of assessments, because we can really improve internally in the sustainable issues, definitely.
Okay, great, Natalia. So let me approach you now. Has the response to these ratings facilitated in some way the integration of ESG criteria into the company's principal areas, businesses?
Thank you very much, first of all, to Javier, Tomás, and AERI for organizing this and inviting Redeia. Redeia is former Red Eléctrica, for those of you that don't know, that happens yet. Let me give you some context on how sustainability is inside the group, and then we go to the question. No? So we are included in the most recognized sustainability indexes. Of course, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index World, we have been present since the year 2005. In the last edition, we were one of the 15 Spanish companies that were included. I think sustainability, or since the early stages of the company, we have a clear commitment to strategic and long-term vision of sustainability. Currently, what we have is a 2030 sustainable plan that is led by the top management of the company, and the messages and the actions are passed to all the organization. This generates a proactive attitude in the company and incorporates sustainability into the day-to-day decision making. No? This plan is monitored by a sustainability committee that is in the board of directors that was created in the year 2018. And yes, you can see that sustainability is part of the whole organization, and many areas of the company that we will comment later and specify more are involved in responding to all the ESG indexes and ratings. No? Monitoring the results, and I agree with Natalia, is a key tool to propose improvements and to manage. And a good example of the degree of integration is that the group has established a sustainability target that has an impact on the remuneration of all the whole workforce. And this target is based in two elements. First, the evolution and the progress on the 2030 plan, and then the permanence and the performance in the key ESG indexes. So you can see the degree of integration in the company. As well, for the top management and the CEO, there is this part of the variable remuneration is as well linked to the permanence in ESG indexes.
I understand. In fact, if I recall properly, you guys were top 1% company within CSA for many years. I still remember with Red Electrica, REE, formerly known you guys. So great, thank you. Okay, now Robert, would you like to add some additional information regarding any of these two questions? And in fact, I will approach you after I ask them both all the time if you have any comment, because you probably do. So feel free to say anything you might consider relevant to both questions that I asked them both. Please, go ahead, Robert.
No, thank you. As head of engagement, of course, I'm always super happy if I hear companies that really get value out of the CSA. We work very hard for companies to be able to realize that value. And what I heard are basically arguments we hear again and again, and maybe a different way is to say it, that the CSA is like a health check for your company, and it gives you the data that you need in order to improve your health. In that case, your sustainability from year to year. And really, you can do that with KPIs, with performance-related KPIs, but also just to create a competitive spirit amongst all the people involved in an organization and help them to understand really the link between sustainability and business strategy and the business value that you add.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, when you talk about the ESG data, and that we have a few chief sustainability officers here in the audience, I know that the ESG data, it's a pain in the neck for financial institutions at this point, and you know that very well. And this is part of the current business today. We have some awful data so far. We have many different standards, not only one but 20. And in the third place, we have a crazy regulation, very demanding, lack of clarity, and all that stuff that probably will raise along this conversation today. Excellent. So let me start with the second question for Natalia, please. Natalia, what obstacles do you encounter when engaging in this kind of non-financial reporting exercises, please? You're expert in this, so you know them all. Please don't forget any of them. You have plenty of them. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Okay, unlike financial evaluations, these non-financial reporting assessments are not regulated. That's the main issue, the main problem for us. Because the methodologies can be completely different among different issuers. And also, some assessors are less transparent than others. In this case, Robert, I can say that S&P, as you said before, it's true, is the most transparent one. I mean, the methodology, you can, all the methodology is publicly available. We can see all the percentages are involved. I mean, any question we ask, you get back to it. So this doesn't happen with some other issues. And this is a big problem for us also. It's difficult to compare across the scores obtained in different ESG analyses, because also it's difficult to explain, not only internally, also externally to our stakeholders, because why can you be the best one in one ESG analyst and then be above the mean in another one? You know what I mean? This is the key point for us, that this fact should be regulated to be more transparent, all the methodologies, and to have a consistency. We know that the ESMA, the European Securities and Market Authority, made a proposal to regulate that, and then the European Commission launched a consultation. Let's see how it ends.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalia. So let me approach you with the second question. How is the internal work with ESG rating agencies and indexes organized? What is the role of the Investor Relations Department in this whole process, please? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. In our case, the Sustainability Department, of course, is the one in charge of dealing with all the information, is responsible for addressing all the questionnaires and coordinating the information inside the inside the company and monitoring the evolution. No, I think it is interesting to share with you the results of some internal analysis that we did in the company about the ESG parameters, in which we identified more than 3,800 indicators in the ESG indexes that we were participating. No. Yeah, so more than half of the indicators are linked to three main areas of the company, which are environment, human resources, and corporate governance, of course. But then for responding and for the assessment of the ESG questionnaires, it requires the involvement of more than 20 different departments in the company. Wow. This can make the task a little bit complex, because some of the main contributing areas don't have yet the developed information systems. They're starting to implement that, and as well because some of the areas have to rely or depend on other departments to collect the information or to calculate the indicators. No, so in here you need to have clear procedures and responsibilities to make that work properly. No. Other interesting highlights from this internal study were that half of the requirements were focused on qualitative aspects, that is risk analysis, commitments, policies, and management systems. 70% of the information was or is public, and the interesting thing here is that only 10% of the indicators were repeated and were the same. Why? Because the different methodologies make that in many cases the analysts introduced nuances or terms that in the definition the definition of the indicators, they are not the same for other evaluations. No. From the IR department, our role in here is well, not direct, okay, in gathering the information, but mainly on communication, of course, to investors of our main ESG aspects of the strategy. No? We work very close with the sustainability department. For example, when we attend an ESG conference or an ESG roadshow, apart from the IR representative, we as well have the participation of one member of the team of the sustainability department. No? And as well, our role as IRs is to give internal feedback internally of what are the main concerns regarding ESG or the main questions that we are receiving from investors.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Sol. In fact, if I remember properly, your current Chief Sustainability Officer, she was the former Investor Relations Officer, which
Correct.
Is amazing. That's really, we're starting to see a whole bunch of conversions in between both positions, which makes a lot of sense. And that's something that somehow AERI is at some point promoting too, because it makes a lot of sense. We see a lot of, in fact, today, like Grifols or Soltec, Chief Investor Relations Officers at a time, Chief Sustainability Officers, which under my perspective makes a whole bunch of sense, okay? Everything but communication and brand makes a lot of sense to me. The closer to the business, the more sense that it makes. Excellent. I'm running out of battery, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Robert, do you have any perspective, comment on both answers? Please, if you do, go ahead, please.
Yes, sure. Well, over the 20 years, what we have observed, initially, we always sent this out to investor relations because we're asking as an investor. And then like up to maybe 5 years ago, this was largely handed from investor relations to an ESG function to complete. And what we see now is that it is moving back to an investor relations function. And I've even seen titles, job titles of head of investor relations and sustainability being really with the same person. So it is clearly a topic that is more and more really addressed directly by investor relations. Just 2 comments on standards. As I mentioned on my slides, we are very much looking at standards. We don't want companies to have to report different things in different avenues, and we align with those very early with CDP. TCFD, GRI. We also indicate that in the question guidance, always which standard does this question refer to, where if you have it reported already, could you recycle information? And so the standardization of the underlying data is very important for us. But then if you get to the question, why are there different scores? I always bring that back to financial reporting, where you also have very clear accounting standards on how a company reports. But when you have an analyst call and you present your latest results, at the end of the meeting or as a result of the meeting, you will have one analyst putting the company on a buy and another one putting the company on a sell or hold. And this is how this information is differently interpreted. Maybe some have a longer time horizon, some have a shorter time horizon, some put more emphasis on certain areas, and it's the same in ESG. So don't expect, even if we have fully standardized data, that every ESG rating will have the same score for your company.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. So let me go back to you again. I'm going back to you. The process, how does the process with ESG investors work exactly, under your perspective? What is your relationship with them? Do you track ESG shareholdings?
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, in the IR department, we think that we have been making an effort in sustainability in the last years, by analyzing the investor universe and as well to try to be as more transparent, the more transparent that we can in our website. So their needs go beyond the merely financial. So our relationship with these investors, we typically every year, of course, organize a ESG specific roadshow, and we attend several ESG conferences. And as well as mentioned, we try to make a job with our website and try to publish KPIs, etc., to make the information available for them. We're starting to see that some investors, ESG investors, are directly sending their own ESG questionnaires to the IR department. So this is a trend that we have been receiving several of them in the couple in the 2 last weeks. So it's something that, well, every year that is going to be starting probably in this trend, okay? Regarding tracking of ESG investors, yes, it's something that we do. And this information is of course, reported to the board of directors as well. In the last years, we have seen an increase in the trend of the ESG shareholders in our shareholder base. The last identification we made in 2022, it showed that 47% of our institutional shareholders were classified as sustainable as ESG, and this compares to 33% in the year 2019. So we are seeing an increasing trend. As well in our activity in the department that we monitor, of the nearly 300 investors that we met last year in 2022, 60% of them were classified as socially responsible. That number, or that figure, has been pretty much the same for the last 3 to 4 years. So the interest is there.
That sounds great. One question: Do you conduct any share ID then, an ESG share ID? How you do? That's very interesting.
Yeah, regular share ID, including this part. Yeah,
that will help a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, okay. Natalia, this is a little longer. This is for you. Apart from working with Standard & Poor's, both Redeia and the CaixaBank undergo a variety of sustainability evaluations and questionnaires, resulting in very good outcomes. For instance, CaixaBank is A-list climate change, low risk in ESG risk rating in Sustainalytics, best bank in Spain, by the way, Decile 1 in ISS ESG, and on the other side, Redeia is the MSCI index AAA, category A for CDP climate change, A-list, first place in the utilities network operator sector, the first company in the ABEX 35 to apply the SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, reporting standard. Natalia, what criteria have you followed to prioritize one rating or evaluation versus another? Please, I know this is a complicated one.
It is, absolutely. Well, our selection is based mainly on 2 points of view. We could say that. First of all, the relevance for investors. definitely, and market notoriety. That means investors with ESG appetite follow up certain ESG scores, not all the scores, for their asset allocations in their portfolios. Therefore, we prioritize the most relevant ESG qualifications for those investors, for the investors. And additionally to that, certain ESG scores have a big market repercussion. For example, in this case, we are talking with S&P, and S&P evaluation, being part of Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, like Robert explained before, it has a great reputational impact in the market. So for us, this is a priority, definitely. The second point would be taking into account this is related to the first question we were talking in this session. I mean, answering some evaluations allows us to push the organization towards improving in sustainability matters. So we prioritize also the evaluations that are more transparent and lets us improve the most, because there are some ESG evaluators, ESG assessors, that they give some examples like saying you are not doing this okay, but they don't explain exactly what they would like to see. So in this case, like I said before, in the case of S&P, it's very transparent. For us, it's very easy to understand what are the expectations and what to do inside the organization. So this is the second point we take into account when we prioritize.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalia. Makes a lot of sense. As usual, Robert, any comment on these two previous questions for you, please? Sure you do. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. A quick comment on the ESG shareholders in the company and the development. Really what we saw over the last years, I think, is that both IR professionals and ESG professionals had to learn each other's different languages. And it was very hard at the beginning for IR to really understand ESG topics and for ESG representatives in the company to articulate them in a way that they become relevant for IR people. And I think this is something where the CSA really helped, because we always asked from an investor perspective, and we helped to turn with our questions sustainability arguments into business arguments, and to link them to a strategy, to link them to KPIs that you track in order for your company to improve. And what Natalia mentioned about decide which rating to do, what I always tell companies, don't just report information for the sake of reporting. If you feel that a question is asked that is not made sense to you, there's no reason for you to collect that data. And what we often hear from companies participating in the CSA, especially those that are not yet ready to answer every question, they say, this is a very difficult question, but it's the right question to ask. And internally, I would like to have that answer. So for example, when we started and introduced in the supply chain management questions around, do you really understand the risks in your supply chain beyond your tier level 1 suppliers? But do you really understand, are there risks in the lower levels that could very quickly damage your reputation or be really a production risk to your company, because there are maybe delivery routes that are no longer possible if they are flooded. There's maybe a natural resource that is no longer available because of climate change issues. Are you aware of all these issues? And supply chain managers told us, that's a very good question. I don't have the answer, but now that you push us for it, I will start working on it. And this is this internal development process that Natalia was speaking about, that we really help companies to understand and make a business case out of sustainability.
Thank you, Robert. And I hope that this session also helps you too, as we are starting the ESG season, to say so, as well as the AGM season. This will also help you to maybe, some improvement, whatever, because we're going to have a whole bunch of questions, I guess, from the audience and all that. And okay, so let me, this is for you. I can't see now. I got everything. How much importance do investors place on a good position in ESG indexes? which indexes are the most important for them, under your perspective,
Yes.
as Redeia?
Yes,
Please go ahead.
always. This is a difficult question as well.
Don't say you don't care about the CSA, please.
No, I will try to give some comments that are based on our interaction with investors, on our internal perception studies, and of external surveys that are publicly available. No? So try to give some comments. ESG ratings are frequently used by many investors, but they are not the only source of information that they use. Okay? Of course, they will have direct engagement with the companies. They will use the corporate sustainability reports that are available in their websites. And they also have in-house research. No? Investors typically use more than one ESG rating. What are the most important factors for ESG rating selection? Well, they basically describe number of companies a rating covers, the quality and disclosure of rating methodology, focus on material issues, the credibility of data sources, and the experience of the research team. And how they use these ratings. Often they typically get the data and all the information, and they incorporate that into their own internal research, no? and their own methodologies, so they can establish their own view of a company performance. No? So ESG ratings is a valuable tool. They can be sometimes considered a starting point, because of course you know the landscape and you can benchmark companies, no? And it's very useful if you want to exclude or identify best-in-class companies. No? According to a Capital Group research made among more than 1,100 investors, the top challenges for incorporating ESG data for investors are the lack of consistency among the different rating providers. We have commented. The need to interpret and analyze third-party ESG data, and the changing methodologies.
I guess.
Yeah. Most important indices for investors, according to our perspective, of course, Dow Jones Sustainability Index is the key, and S&P. Others can be MSCI, Sustainalytics, and CDP.
Excellent. We will have them all here in a few months, by the way. I have... let me see what I have. I'm a little lost now, but I have a question in mind. Robert, I'm going to approach you now, if you're so kind. And this is the following. We, as N-World, we teach ESG and sustainable finance at Spanish stock exchange and a whole bunch of other business schools over here, i.e. BME, a whole bunch of the best ones, the more financial ones. And at some point I keep saying, and most people disagree with me, but I would like to know you did not expect this one, but I keep saying that the CRAs, the credit rating agencies, we're talking about Standard & Poor's, we're talking about Moody's, we're talking about Fitch, we're talking about DBRS, will be in a few years the only one that will embed the ESG performance within the credit rating, to say so. Would you agree with this? Or does it sound okay to you, or this might be crazy? And with all due respect to Sustainalytics and CDPs and all those guys, what do you think, Robert?
I cannot speak for our colleagues at S&P Global Ratings. It's a different unit in S&P Global. But what I have heard them say publicly for many years is that integrating ESG topics is not at all new in credit ratings. And if you evaluate the long-term risk of companies, of course, already today, you take into account long-term sustainability risks. Could it be climate change or any other risk that is relevant for your company, that is relevant for your default probability?
Thank you, Robert. These questions will be, of course, in 2 months' time, I will just reframe this very same question. Okay, thank you. Let me, Natalia, This is for you. In your opinion, would the CSA, the Corporate Sustainability Assessment, be of value to corporations and entities of all kinds, irrespective of the size, geographic location, or listing status? Further, what is your perspective on the present model, which permits global comparability? Go ahead, please, Natalia.
This is a very good question, and difficult also.
I know.
Because sometimes we are not sure if working with global rankings is extremely useful. I mean, it's useful, of course, but we are not sure if it's the best way. Not only for us, also for the market, for the investors. I mean, the fact of having different regulations across different countries or geographical areas makes us think that we are not comparable. For example, CaixaBank, we are not comparable to an Asiatic bank, for example. And then the scores should not be comparable, but the market compares the scores at the end. I mean, we know we have Dow Jones Sustainability Index World, Europe, we know it, but at the end, you've got an 80 and the other one has an 87 and the market compares. So we are not sure if this is useful because the regulation is treating us in a different way. So permits us maybe some things that to another one doesn't permit it, or the contrary. And this also happens in the size issue, because my question is, is comparable a very, very, very small bank that can evaluate one by one all the transactions of the bank, or which governance is completely different to a 200 billion assets bank? Maybe the way of assessing the companies should vary depending on the size or the geographical location. Has this sense? Yeah. I'll answer the question.
Yeah. Okay. So now, Robert, any comment on these two previous answers you might have?
Yes. We have 62 industry-specific approaches, but we don't differentiate by region or activity. Is it really a corporation that is in one jurisdiction or a handful, or the other one is global? They all have different challenges and advantages in the questionnaire. And of course, one thing we do not do is we don't ask companies to break the law in answering our questions. But if one region has a lower regulation and the CSA requires, in order to get full score, to have a higher level of expectation and maybe a higher threshold, it's not breaking the law having that. What we often hear from German companies, of course, as an example, is that they adhere to the German Corporate Governance Code, which requires board members to attend 50% of the meetings. The CSA has a minimum requirement of 75, and you're not breaking the German code by having an own requirement in your company to say, we exceed this and go to 75. And this standardization that we apply here, I think, is very important for investor users, because what we see more and more is that 24 years ago, when the CSA was established, this was the topic of a boutique asset manager in Zurich and maybe 3 other boutique asset managers around the world. And now it is all the big names. They have their own ESG teams, and they use scores as a first level of segmentation, maybe, and they rather look in quartiles than in, is one company scoring 86 and the other one 87. And they are more and more looking behind the scores into the data. And this is also something that we provide on our platforms. We give companies the option to allow us to not just share their scores, but to also share the underlying data. And one thing I forgot to say, that a key differentiator of the CSA is also that we are not just looking at public reporting, but we give companies the option to report and disclose additional information. And only with that additional information, we can paint the full picture of a company's performance. For example, when we look at 2 companies and both have a score of 0 on or low score, let's say, on a gender pay gap, then it is very different if a company starts to address this topic. They understand that they have a gap, they have set a target to close the gap, but they are not yet there to really meet the highest expectations, to a company who does not even collect that data, and therefore doesn't even know where they are, and clearly doesn't care. And if they get a score of 0, it's a very different 0, right, than the company that already cares. And investors understand that. So we give companies the option. It doesn't impact the scoring, but you have the option to say, please disclose all the data that I put in the CSA to the investor community. And we do that in the context of the questionnaire. So we provide the data user with the same information that the company has, the same definitions, the exact question language, so that you can really understand what was asked. And through our verification process, we make sure that investors really compare apples and apples, and not if you work in a self-reported environment where you would just go in and screen different annual reports. It's very hard to standardize that data and really compare the same information. So this is the value add that we provide once a company submits the data to us.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. This is our questionnaire to you. You send yours, which is pretty demanding, and this is ours to you. Anyway, thank you so much, Robert. Sol, let me approach you now. What are the future trends expected in this ESG investment world under your perspective as ERO?
Yes. Well, let me say that despite the increase in ESG assets under management and despite the increase in ESG shareholders that we have in Redeia, we typically don't receive many questions about sustainability. No.
Don't say it.
No, well, 2 reasons. No, because it's easy, I think. The sector our core that our core business belongs is the electricity grids. Basically, this is a key role in the energy transition. So fighting against climate change has been, well, it's in the DNA of our company. And you know, in regular meetings, you talk about the evolution of the business. That is key. You know, this has been the key topic in the last years. The key interest coming from ESG investors. No? So that, I guess that big part is because of that. And on the other hand, I don't know if the efforts that we have been trying to be more transparent and publish more information in the website, well, it's making it more accessible for specific questions. But the truth is that we don't receive many. In any case, the trend of the interest. We have conducted a perception study in the last months among institutional investors. And one of the questions that we included was the main issues that may affect their investment decision. No? Of course, the top places were business and economic reasons, but just after that, with 80% of the score, are related to corporate governance and human rights. Wow. So maybe this is going to be the trend from our perspective. No? Regarding location of the investors, traditionally we have seen greatest interest in Scandinavian and French investors. But in the last months, we are seeing, or even years, we're seeing more interest from big investors in other European countries and as well US and Australia, etc.
Excellent. We still have 30 minutes to go. Let me make a joke here. When I keep telling my team that when we hear something like that is embedded, I mean, when you hear speech coming from a CEO, chairman, CEO, executive, whatever, they say, this is part of our DNA. I keep telling them they're lying. I'm kidding now. I mean, it's not your case, okay? Because you are not a CEO yet. You will become, for sure. I was kidding. So thank you so much, Sol. Natalia, this one's for you. We're approaching the 5th question out of 6. What is your viewpoint on this year's methodology update? Do you believe you will be able to manage all this necessary information within the proposed 2 months time frame or windows? Or do you anticipate requiring a deadline extension? Go ahead, please, Natalia.
Yeah, I would like to say 2 things in this question, because regarding the 2-month time frame, we don't anticipate any problem on that. Bearing in mind that we we understand that the questionnaire is visible for us before it gets open to complete it. So we can work internally on the questions, and then in the 2-month time frame, we can complete the questionnaire. I think it's even more flexible, like Robert said before. I mean, we see it positively, this 2-month time frame, and then you can choose which is the one that fits better, suits us better for us. But I would like to say that the last year's methodology of releasing the results in different timeframes made us experience some difficulties because for making comparisons with our peers, for example, we had that one peer had the result and we didn't have it. So this is very difficult to explain internally to our top management, and also externally because we had a lot of questions from our investors. Also, we had our score blinded during some weeks. I don't know if you have a lot of clients, Robert. I don't know if you remember that, but we have it, and this was also difficult to explain. We have had a lot of questions on that I saw your result and now I don't see it. What happens, you know? So we wonder, because we've seen this methodology of releasing the results separately in different timeframes keeps going this year. So we were wondering if maybe S&P can give the results in advance to the company to review it or something like that. I don't know. Just this is our feedback.
Not bad. Okay, Robert, I guess you have some comments on this too. Go ahead, please.
Yes, just very quickly for Sol. I heard a company once answering the same question, and they said, well, an investor will not say in an analyst call, they will not say, and now the ESG question. Many times the ESG question is embedded in the context, and it is up to you as an responder to mention ESG in that context. So if it is a question about emerging risks, if it is a question about where you see challenges on your cost base, etc., or opportunities, you should make the case proactively on how sustainability and the link between sustainability and business strategy, I'm saying that again and again, how you can leverage business impact out of that, how you could reduce costs, how you could realize risks early, and what impact that had. And with the CSA, you have a lot of answers in this area prepared because we asked them to you, and you also know how you compare with your answer against your peers in your industry. And you know, as IR professionals, what are areas that I want to proactively raise and what are areas where I maybe still need to catch up with my peers, where I am silent until I get a question that I have to answer this. And for Natalia, I'm very happy to hear that you think the 2-month window is not a problem. For 22 years, it was not a problem, and we only extended it to 3 months with COVID, because that was a challenging time for companies and also for us, with everybody working from home, to manage this process in a 2-month window. Indeed, with the ability now to only start when you are ready with your documentation, we really think 2 months should be well enough to prepare for this. With regards to release of scores, this was a first last year. We are all learning by doing. And the alternative would have been to only release scores in March. And I think nobody wants that either, you know. So we want to give scores to companies as early as possible. This year, we even start in August. But it is not in our control if all of your competitors are ready to report at the same time. So if you want a cutoff that is comparable to the past, I would say stick to the December DJSI launch, where you can really say the universe of the 3,500 largest companies, this is what I benchmark against. There's also a specific scorecard that just looks at the DJSI universe that gives you your ranking in that peer group, especially if you have KPIs that are remuneration relevant. I would recommend to stick to that peer group that is more or less constant over the years, looking at the 3,500 largest companies. And I'm happy to say that I have an answer to your last question. We will this year publish scores first confidential to companies. And you will have a 2-week window to raise queries and concerns. And if you raise any, that score will remain confidential to you until that query is solved. And either we say we uphold our decision, or indeed we are all human. There was an oversight on our end and we correct that. And then only then the score will go final and be visible.
So great to hear that. Thank you.
Natalia is nodding, and she looks pretty happy now after this answer. So this is great. Okay. By the way, I used to engage with my analyst time ago, like 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I used to hang up the phone and just give her a call, Marion Swoboda, and I would do that because probably we were only in a few banks assess, not like now. Anyway, Natalia, I need to go back to you again. Okay. This is the 6th question, the last one coming from me. How has your interaction and communication with the Standard & Poor's been? Do you have any positive feedback or areas of improvement regarding the evaluation process and interaction with analysts? There you go.
Okay. Positive feedback for sure, because during last year we had to interact a lot with S&P analysts, so we definitely thank S&P for attending all our questions. We had a lot, and as I said before, not all the analysts, issuers, ESG issuers have this kind of transparency and also attendance to the questions. However, we understand that S&P is a big issuer, and sometimes it's difficult to establish a fluid communication with the same analyst. What happened to us is that we had some questions, and we launched some questions during the CSA process. Then we had some misunderstandings afterwards. We don't know if we didn't understand exactly the question or what happened, because what we understood or we were told was slightly different than the final scored. Then in the debrief call happened something like that the analysts that were attending us, we understood something different than the final things that were done. Maybe because the analyst was another person, maybe because there were some misunderstandings between us and them. So just to be positive, because this is very difficult, for us it's very important to have this fluid communication, because we are very conscious on the CSA. This is, as I said in the beginning, this is the way to improve. So definitely we would like to have this, improving this communication to better perform in the CSA, because it's the way to perform in the sustainable matters inside the organization.
Yeah, and you guys, I know, Kaisa, you guys are nailing it, and we see you coming up all the way. So anyway, Sol, this is my 6th and last question for you, right? So, Sol, would you recommend companies that are not investing enough in ESG to start conducting these types of assessments as the CSA is?
Yes, well, there are several positive aspects of conducting these assessments. No? From an external point of view, it is clear that the demand of ESG investments has grown significantly in recent years and is going to be growing in the future. ESG investing has become mainstream, and many clients of the funds and as well demanding that, no, for the investors. A couple of figures of this trend to illustrate this trend. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates ESG assets could reach $50 trillion by 2025. This compares to $35 trillion in year 2020. Yeah, and the UN Principles for Responsible Investment has more than 3,500 signatories, with over $120 trillion in assets under management, and they have committed to incorporate ESG issues into their investment decisions. No? As well, the creation of the Sustainable Index investments has enabled a massive acceleration of capital towards the companies that are better prepared to address these ESG factors. And we have mentioned earlier that ESG ratings are used by many investors and as a key tool. No? From an internal point of view, we have already been commenting the positives of using this. it can help to educate internal stakeholders. It can build the internal processes and pushing and promoting internal discussions on ESG strategy. And as well, these ratings are a valuable internal benchmarking tool, no? Because well, you can guide decision making and improve sustainability performance. When you have an evaluation from an external and independent view on your performance, and you can compare with competitors and peers, no? So I would say that there are clear positives. No, it's true that it requires a lot of resources, time, and money, and yeah, people. But probably, if a company is starting, maybe they have to be or to study, and it makes sense to decide in which indexes to be positioned. No? Because you cannot start with everything at the same time. It's a study that needs to be done.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe Robert, you might have any comment on these two answers, please. This is the last one.
Thank you, Natalia, for your frank feedback. It's really our intention to be there for companies all the time in the quickest windows possible. Sometimes there is a lot of demand with questions, but in general, we try to get back to you within a matter of days. And unfortunately, we are growing massively, and we have also people that don't just join, but also some that leave, unfortunately, because ESG expertise, and especially people that know the CSA inside out, are in high demand. And so they might find jobs somewhere else. But as much as possible, we try to have the same people talk to you, and we have a system of records that is in the back end of the questionnaire that you see is our system, where we track the responses and communications that we have, and the best we can, and we always are ready to stand corrected. As you know, if something was overlooked, was misinterpreted, then it's in our own best interest, because we serve investors with the scores, with the data, to have that corrected. Then for the second question, Sol answered that very, very well. Thank you for promoting the CSA. I want to come back to what I said earlier. It's a health check for your company, and it's free of charge. And what companies tell us again and again really is that the value of participation starts with the process. It's not just when you get your results, but especially companies that are new to the topic. Through the weights system that I showed, and we provide detail of how the weights are assigned in the questionnaire, they can start to work on criteria with the highest weight, and they see questions how they would be asked to them from the investment community. And they really use that, companies tell us, they use this to structure their approach to sustainability and to understand where they need to be more transparent in areas where they need to start to collect data, even if they don't have it yet. So it's a free health check that puts you on the right course if you are really committed to doing this. If you just do it as a fig leaf exercise, then don't do the CSA, because it's certainly for that purpose too much effort.
Thank you, Robert. I will not miss the opportunity that I have you here now. I have an additional question for you, if you're so kind. What if you are a non-listed company, a not yet listed company, an SME, or whatever it is? Do you think it would make sense to follow the CSA, to apply, to do it or not? Would you please?
We have a special methodology for non-listed companies. There are certain questions that don't apply, but if you're not listed, then you see a special version of the questionnaire. Good that you point me to that. Yeah. There is a special version for very, very small companies that are non-listed. It's called CSA Fundamentals, but any medium-sized company would be asked to answer the full questionnaire. And so we do have that in terms of companies that plan a listing. We had a number of success stories in the past. One that is already some years back is Royal Mail. Before they went public, they participated in the CSA for 2 years because they said, we want to attract in our IPO sustainability-focused investors already 10 years ago. And at the time they had their IPO and went public, they immediately came out as industry leader because they had these 2 years to prepare in the CSA and close the gaps that they had. And they were very proud of that achievement.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thanks so much. Okay, we still have 15 minutes to go, all right? We said at the beginning that this would last from 75 to 90 minutes. So I would like to open the floor for any questions that we might have here. Any kind of question, go ahead. Do you have a question?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a question for Robert, if it will be possible. Does S&P have a way to verify that all the information included in the CSA by the company is correct?
So if it's third-party verify?
Yes, if there is any way to verify it by S&P, or do they trust the company?
Okay. Robert, did you get that one?
Yes, I did. Yeah. There are different levels of verification that we can do without being on site with the company. First of all, is like every audit, when a company submits the questionnaire, the person signing off for this says that this is, to the best of their knowledge, correct information that they provide to us. There are questions where we are very strict, and we want to see a third-party verification report for the data to achieve really full points in a question. And that report cannot just be any report. It has to meet certain standards that we have for the independence and the type of report that was conducted, and the transparency also of the verification process. Then there are areas where we require questions to be answers to be verifiable in the public domain. That share of questions is increasing over time, and it's now up to 50% of the questions that require public reporting. That could be in your annual report, your sustainability report. Some questions require to be in the annual report, which is another way for us to ensure that this is in fact a report that underwent a certain level of scrutiny, because board members are typically liable for the annual report, and it is audited, the information that is in there. And there are other question areas where we then want to see just evidence of the company. For example, when we say, do you conduct audits on your suppliers? And they say, yes, we do that. Then we ask to attach, please, one of the audit reports. And we're not interested in the name of the supplier or the corrective actions that were raised or the value of the contract. All of that can be blacked out, but we want to see as evidence a piece of paper that indeed looks like an audit report that was conducted. Of course, you can cheat in that, right? They have the intention to produce fake evidence for the purpose of the CSA. Sometimes we find it. Some companies create fake websites when we ask for things to be documented publicly, and they put up a website that is accessible to us, but it's nowhere linked from their own homepage. So you would never get there unless you know the website address. We cross-check that automatically. So if a company does that, we raise a red flag and we say, don't do that again, please. It will reflect bad on how we interpret your information.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Do we have any online questions? Javier, it was your role.
Hello, yes. Robert, you have a few questions. I will skip a couple of them because they are purely technical questions, and we might follow up after the event. But there are a couple of them that are pretty basic, but I would like you, one of them comes from a small bank, asking if you could please summarize the criteria for one of the companies to be potentially eligible to join the Dow Jones, okay? And followed by another one that is could be in the same line, even though it's more for the CSA, that is asking, give me 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. Here it is. And how a company gets evaluated by the CSA, if they need an invitation from S&P, or just become a member, or they become a member by paying the fee and submit their sustainability information for the CSA.
You got 2 questions, Robert.
Yeah, good questions. We hear them often. Happy to answer. DJSI has a very objective approach, and we are inviting the largest companies globally. We're looking at a company's free float asset capitalization. So if they are large holdings, typically, depending on the exchange, 5% or up are not considered free float. That could be family holdings, government holdings, or holdings of a mother company. So we're just looking at free float. We sort companies by free float, and then for DJSI World, for example, we start at who is it currently, Microsoft, and we go down to number 2,500. And these are the companies that are eligible to be invited for DJSI. And then in that eligible universe, the top 10% of companies in each industry, the top 10% ordered by score, they will make it in. And how many make it into the index then depends on the size of the industry. There are industries that are very large, like financials with hundreds of companies. So the top 10% means there is space for a lot of companies. If 200 are in the industry, the top 10% are 20 companies. There are industries that are very small, like aluminium, for example, with just a dozen companies, so that the space is very limited and maybe 1 or 2 companies have space in the index in that industry. And if you are headquartered in Europe, for example, the DJSI Europe is looking at the 600 largest companies for the same rules headquartered in Europe. So it doesn't depend on your performance, it purely depends on your size to be eligible for an index. And the next question about the invitation, we of course have a target universe that we want to assess that covers other indices that already have ESG versions that use the CSA results as an input. For example, the S&P 500 has an ESG version, the S&P 500 ESG. I just got an updated number yesterday. There are 7 billion in assets tracking the S&P 500 ESG, quite a substantial amount already. We have the S&P Global 1200, which includes the Europe 350 as an ESG version. Both of them have ESG versions. And we have an invitations page on the website that is linked, and you can see which index your company is eligible for. So not just DJSI, but also the key flagship other indices you would see there. And if you find your name there, then you can just go to the CSA portal. The link is also in the presentation, and register your account. If you don't find your name there, you can reach out. And as long as you agree to have a public score, if you allow S&P Global to publish a score on your company, the assessment is free of charge.
Thank you, Robert. Any other question coming from the audience? Please, here. Do you have a question? Do you need a mic? Please.
Hi, Robert. This is Hisako from Telefonica. Good to meet you. And thank you for the presentation. I just have a question, because I think internally a lot of us have experienced, in the last couple of years particularly, that the CSA has become, let's say, harder and harder. I mean, I think that's the impression we're getting from the company perspective. And I was wondering if you have any kind of empirical evidence that could maybe back that answer up. I mean, I think management are always very keen to understand the scores and how we benchmark ourselves against our peers. And it's been very interesting this year to see sort of actually quite a significant drop across some other of our peers' scores. So I was just wondering if you have any empirical evidence that you could share with us about just generally company scores this year and how they compare to previous years.
I don't have the empirical evidence on my hand, sorry, but I can tell you as a rule, the CSA gets harder and harder every year. That's actually what the companies that participate for many years also value. They say this is a challenge, but many say challenge accepted. And what I heard, I'm doing this for over 9 years now, speaking to a lot of companies about their results. And when we introduced, for example, in human rights, the question on, do you actually understand the benefit of all the trainings that you provide in your company and how you educate your people, and do you know the link between that and your evolving business strategy, and can you put a number on that, or at least a qualitative description of the value of your trainings? And we asked that question because we saw when we speak to companies and we say, we give you $1 million to invest in energy efficiency, what is the outcome? They would know within 15 minutes, I'm exaggerating, but if we have this amount to invest, this is the bottom line in energy savings. And if we asked, you have $1 million to invest in trainings, what is the impact on your bottom line? They had no answer. And in the first year, HR head of HR would come to us and say, this is impossible to measure and we cannot do that. And then 2 years later, they say it's very difficult to measure, but we're now able to do it. And it helped us so much. And as HR, we now have a seat at the table in boardroom decisions, because management now understands if they want the business to shift in a certain direction, it cannot be done by just hiring new people, but you need to bring your existing workforce along. And for that, you need to understand what training demand is there, how do you do that, and how do you measure the success of that training. And the companies that have started to implement measures to at least qualitatively in the beginning track that, they valued very much to be challenged by the CSA in those areas. So this is what we do again and again. We have a team that looks at what are underreported issues, what are emerging trends, what are emerging risks that we want companies to address early. And then we start with questions, first of all, with a low weight if new questions are introduced. And we maybe start in a way where we really, in the first year, only want to see, are companies able to report these metrics at all before we set thresholds. And maybe in some questions, when we start, you would see 4 criteria that we predefine. Do you do this, this, and that? And then we have other. And in other, we then get industry feedback from companies that say, this is another element that we do. And if we see a lot of companies do that, we make it one of the options in the mandatory section or in the predefined section. So the questionnaire is evolving. We're not doing that to make your life more difficult, necessarily only more difficult, but we do it because we really see that there is a need to maybe address this in a bit more stringent manner. And it's no longer enough to just say, yes, we have some kind of tech strategy, but you want to see some detailed points, what a good tech strategy entails, for example. And then you want to see it public and not just being hidden somewhere in a drawer in the company. So every year, the expression I use is we tighten the screws a little bit for the benefit of really being able to differentiate leaders in an industry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. Did Robert answer your question properly? I know he did. Okay, we have 2 minutes to go, and we will just, one last question on my side for Sol. Natalia, do you have any further questions you might want to raise? No, it looks like you had. Anyway, any of the questions that have not been answered yet, please keep forwarding them to us. We will give them proper answer. We'll forward them to Robert and all that, so don't worry about that. And just, well, the wrap-up is pretty clear. This is getting tougher and tougher every day. This is a process that keeps being every year, everybody improves, so the bar is getting up all the time. And I think having Robert, the head of the CSA global engagement head, it's been a privilege, as well as having Redella, the Arrow, Sol, Cabeza. Thank you so much for being here. Natalia Valls from CaixaBank, thank you so much. Robert, thanks so very much for your kindness and everything. And I guess that things are much more clear now for all of us. And probably there will be a dramatic increase of solicitants after, after this webinar. So this is it. Thank you so much. And see you in maybe 2 months. And so thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Okay. You
Thank
can
you.
clap if you want to.
Oh, no.
Okay. Thank you.